Some characters feel like they already have a story. You just have to draw them. Whenever I draw a fantasy portrait, I almost never just draw the character by itself. I always end up imagining who they are, where they're from, and what world do they belong in. I've always loved fantasy stories, and over time, I've created little pieces of story for each one of my characters. Sometimes it's just a small idea, and sometimes it grows into something much bigger. So instead of just drawing a bunch of random fantasy portraits, I thought it would be a good idea to start building a fantasy archive of sorts, a collection of characters and their stories that all belong in this world. Each one will have their own role, their own story, and their own little place in this world. And the character that I'm starting with today is called the Lantern Keeper. They say that if you travel the old forest roads long enough, you might eventually see a light moving between the trees. Not a torch, not a campfire, just a single lantern, carried by someone walking slowly along the edge of the road. Most people who claim to have seen him never noticed his face clearly. The forest plays strange tricks with shadows, but they all remember the same thing: the steady light of the lantern. The man who carries it is known by many names, depending on who tells the story. But the one that stayed with people the longest is simply the Lantern Keeper. No one seems to know exactly where he came from. Some say he has been walking those roads longer than the villages themselves have existed. Others believe he appears only when the forest begins to change, when something old and quiet in the world starts to shift. Whatever the truth is, there is one thing that everyone agrees on: the Lantern Keeper never walks without his light. The lantern itself is unusual. At first glance, it looks like any other travel lantern: metal frame, glass panels, a small flame burning quietly inside. But people who have stood close enough to see it say the flame doesn't behave like ordinary fire. It doesn't flicker wildly when the wind blows. It doesn't struggle when rain begins to fall. Instead, it burns slowly, calmly, as if it already knows exactly how long it needs to last. Some travelers swear the light grows brighter when the forest around them grows too quiet, as if the lantern is responding to something hidden in the darkness between the trees. No one knows what fuels it, and no one has ever seen it go out. The forests where the Lantern Keeper walks are old, older than most people realize. If you follow the narrow paths that wind between the trees, you'll sometimes find stones beside the road carved with a strange mark, a broken circle split by a single line. No one remembers who carved them there, but the marks appear again and again, always along the same forgotten routes. The Lantern Keeper is often seen near these stones, sometimes standing beside them, sometimes simply passing by, as if checking that they are still there. And on certain nights when the forest grows still enough, travelers say those carvings give off a faint blue glow, very soft, just enough to notice if you're looking for it. The keeper himself doesn't look like a king or a warrior. He looks more like a traveler who has spent many years on the road. His cloak is worn from weather and distance. The fabric has faded in places where rain and sunlight have touched it again and again. His boots are sturdy, made for long walks through uneven paths and muddy ground. Nothing about him seems magical, at least not at first glance. But there is something about the way he moves through the forest that people remember. Slow, careful, watchful, as if he's not just traveling through the woods, but guarding something within them. Those who have looked closely at his face often say the same thing. He looks tired. Not in the way someone looks after a long day of work, but in the quiet way of someone who has been carrying a responsibility for a very long time. His eyes are always watching the path ahead, and sometimes the trees themselves. Because the lantern keeper doesn't just walk the road, he watches the forest. And sometimes the forest seems to watch him back. also stories about his hands. They say that when the keeper reaches one of the old carved stones, he sometimes rests his hand gently against the surface. No one knows why, but travelers who have witnessed it say that the lantern often grows a little brighter in that moment, just for a few seconds, as if the light recognizes the mark, or perhaps the mark recognizes the light. After that, he continues walking, always forward, never turning back. And then, of course, there is the lantern itself, the one thing everyone remembers clearly. On nights when fog rolls low across the forest floor, the lantern can sometimes be seen from very far away. A small, warm glow drifting slowly between the trees. For lost travelers, it has guided many safely back to the road. For others, it has simply reminded them that someone is still watching over the old paths. Because the forests of this world hold many things, some beautiful, some forgotten, and some that are better left undisturbed. That is why the lantern keeper continues to walk, night after night, step after step, carrying a light that never fades, along roads where the darkness has begun to grow a little too curious. And that is the story of the lantern keeper, a traveler of an old road, a watcher of quiet places, and the first entry in the fantasy archive.